Hello, I'm Matt and welcome to Badger Workshop. A couple of weeks ago I made 3 different Christmas gifts for the adults in the family. Now I need to do a couple for my niece and nephew. I've sketched up a little idea for a couple of money boxes. I'm going to make it out of this white oak that I've been waiting to use for a couple of years. It's rough sawn, so first I get one surface planed and then I can get an edge done as well. With those surfaces cleaned up, I can then run the straight edge along the fence and rip this to the width I need. These boards are far too thick for what I need, so I want to rip them down. I'm going to do it on the bandsaw, as it's got a thinner blade, so I'm going to get less wastage. I'd got a brand new 1/4 inch blade, which is not ideal for this, but as it was the sharpest I had, that's what I used. With the boards ripped down, I can now put them through the thicknesser to clean up that rough sawn face. Now for why I got this saw, the ability to actually tilt the blade, so I set it to 45 degrees. These money boxes are going to be square, and I want them to have mitered corners. When I've got the first 45 cut, I can then set up a stop block on the fence. I can then just keep flipping the piece over and cutting all the parts out. I want to make 2 of these boxes, so I need 8 sides. The plan is for these boxes to have a little perspex window so you can see how rich you are. I've got this hole saw that's slightly smaller than the perspex disc I bought. With the hole saw chucked up, I can start drilling out the holes. I drill halfway through, then I flip the piece over and drill the rest from the other side to avoid any breakout. So this disc is about 10mm bigger than the hole, so I can set up this rebating bit in my router. I can then run it round, cutting a little rebate on the inside of the 2 panels I've cut with a hole in. This perspex disc now fits perfectly in there. Now I can get the 4 mitered sides glued up. As these boxes are so small, my miter clamps won't work. Instead, I'm going to go for the technique of using some masking tape. I lay out a couple of strips and then the sides for the box, then I can get some glue on the joints. I'm doing this on the outfeed of the table saw as it's actually a bit flatter than my beat up old bench. With the glue spread out in all the joints, then I can lift the tape up and start folding the box up. With it together, I can then just pull the tape tabs up, pulling it tight and getting it all stuck down. While I leave these to dry, I can start work on the top and the bottom of the boxes. Using the bits I ripped off the oak earlier, I'm going to do the top and the bottom. Now I need to laminate a couple of bits together for that. If I'd planned my design better, I could have used the same width of boards for all the sides and the top and the bottom, but I didn't, so I'm gluing these 2 bits together. Whilst they're clamped up and drying, I can go back to working on the boxes. So now they're set up, I can get the tape taken off. I want the top and bottom to be perfectly flat, so I'm just using a bit of sandpaper stuck to a board to flatten them. I can now use the cross-cut sled with a stop block set up to get the top and the bottom pieces cut to the right size. The top and bottom panels are just going to get glued in place, so I run a bead of glue around the top and bottom. Then I can get the panel put in place and get loads of squeeze clamps on to hold it down. Instead of faffing around trying to get the top and the bottom perfectly flush, I've cut the panels oversized, and then when the glue's dry, I take them to the bandsaw and trim off any excess. You could also just sand it back or use a flush trim router. When I've got most of the waste removed, I can then sand the whole of the box down. I'm sure this box will be strong enough for its intended use, but I want to add some extra support of some splines. This will make it much stronger, but I'm going to use a contrasting wood, so it's also going to make it look more interesting. But before I can do that, I need to make a spline jig. So I'm ripping down some 18mm ply and then cutting some 45-degree wedges. In one of the bits of ply, I can then pre-drill some holes all along one edge. Then get some glue on and the two bits can be put together. At either end, I'm just putting these little triangles I've cut. This will keep it at perfectly 90 degrees. But I don't want it at 90 degrees, I want it at 45. So I've cut a couple of more little triangles and I can tilt this over and sit it on those. With those in place and it's set to 45 degrees, I can then drill through and screw down from the inside to get them attached. I need a way of attaching this to the saw, so I'm just going to put this thin strip of ply onto these supports. My idea for this jig is it's not made for the saw. It can go along any cross-cut sled or any mitre gauge and used on any machine. So on this saw I can get it positioned along the fence and then get a clamp on either end. With it in position, I can now raise the blade a small way and make the first cut just through the bottom of this sled. Now I can see where the cut's going to come through. I can get the box in for reference and raise the blade to the height I need. I now position the box where I want the first spline to be cut and then I get a stop block cut in place. I can now push the sled through the blade, cutting that spline into the box and then rotating the blocks 90 degrees and making the cut again. I keep doing this until I've got a cut on all four sides. I can then reposition the stop block and cut another series of slots. I keep doing this until I've got a row of 4 slots down each side of the box. As I say, I don't just want the splines to offer support, I also want them to add a bit of interest to the box. So I've got some walnut that's going to contrast nicely with the white oak, and I get that ripped down so it's going to fit into the slots left by the curve of the blade. To maximise the amount I'm going to get out of these strips, I'm going to cut them into little triangles to fit into the curved slots I've cut. When I have a pile of little walnut triangles, I can get some glue put into the slots and then these can be pushed into place. They're a nice snug fit, but they can just be pushed in by hand. I leave them for a few hours to dry and then I can take them back to the bandsaw and cut off any excess. With the splines trimmed flush, I can then give it all a sand down, working my way up through the grits. I want to soften the top and the bottom of the box, so I set the round over bit in the router and put a round over on these surfaces. Now it's the bit I dread on any box build, cutting it open. I normally do this on the table saw, but this is just small enough to be able to fit through the bandsaw. It's certainly safer to do it this way, but I take it nice and slow because I really don't want any blade drift. Now, as these are going to be money boxes, they really need a slot to be able to get some coins in. I mark out a slot big enough to accept a £2 coin, and then I can drill out most of the slot on the drill press. clean up the rest of the slot, I get the box lid clamped up in the vise and then get a small square metalworking file. This does a pretty good job of squaring up that slot. I don't want the lid to have any hinges or latches. I want it to go on with just a friction fit. So using a bench hook, I just cut down some more thin strips of walnut. I cut 4 bits down that just fit nice and snug in each of the lids. When I'm happy with the fit, I can then get some glue put in place, get them back in and clamped up. I leave them to dry for a few hours, and then we can get on to applying some finish. I hate to be predictable, but you probably guessed it. There's some Danish oil going on here. As soon as the oil goes on, it really brings out the colour of that walnut against the white oak. I can now get the Perspex discs put in place. They got some protected film on, and then I push them in. I was going to put them on with some super glue, but they're such a snug, tight friction fit, I think that's going to be fine like it is. And that's them all finished. Now, I'm not going to fill them up with money for the kids, because I'm too mean. So, I'm going to go for sweets instead, because I'm sure they won't have been given enough chocolate already. So that's them all done. A couple of handmade oak and walnut money boxes for my niece and nephew. Thanks for watching, thanks to my Patreons, and please subscribe for more videos.